hating on you with their friends, girl, you got it.
Hey Slay Babes, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about maximizing your products. I decided to use a blush as an eyeshadow from Girl Code Cosmetics, and I'm going to show you how you can use this palette all over the face. So of course with my full glams, I start with the eyebrows first. I'm going to take my Duo Lash Glue and I'm going to use this to secure the brows down. This is going to help them last and stay in place all day. I'm going to brush this through with a spoolie and then pat it down with my hands. Then I'm going to continue to use the products to fill in the eyebrows. I also used that Girl Code Cosmetics eyebrow pencil to do her brows today. Filling in the brows with this pencil, I really liked it. It's kind of a neutral color, so it doesn't add too much brown and it's not too dark. It really mimics the eyebrow hair shade, and I really love that about this pencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line the bottom of her brow and then I'm going to line the top of her brow. After I get a good shape, I'm going to fill in the tail of the eyebrow first, and then I'm going to do light brow strokes in the front of the eyebrow and brush it through with the end of my spoolie, so that way it can get a good natural look and it can be ombre'd from the front part to the tail. So for me, when it comes to filling in brows, sometimes I do a little hiccup. You know, they don't really match at first. As y'all can see, her eyebrows are kind of thick, but when I go in with concealer and I get a good shape and it matches the left eyebrow, it slims down and I promise y'all it looks way, way, way better. Taking a flat brush and butterscotch from Too Faced Cosmetics, I'm going to press against her skin and go really slow. I'm used to doing her eyebrows, so I kind of got like a really good feel of how her eyebrow shape should be. So I'm going to press that along the shape I did for her brows. How you get that sharp line underneath is you press the brush against the skin and make sure both sides of your brush are covered with the concealer, so that way you get a consistency all the way through. When you run out of concealer on one side, you just got to flip the brush over to the other side and it'll have concealer on it already. If you're new to my channel, you don't know, but I use two concealers. I use a darker one from the front and then I use a lighter one to highlight the brow bone. So I used a darker concealer and I filled in the front part so I can use it as her base. And then I'm going to go in, and I think this is Warm Beige from Too Faced, and I'm going to do the tail. Again, I'm going to go really slow and I'm going to press that brush against her skin so that way I can get a sharp line. And then I'm going to take that same concealer, put it on her lid so that way I can use it as the base for our eyeshadows. When I do neutral shadows, I don't really worry about going too bright on the base because I really wanted to mimic almost the color of the concealer I'm going to use on her face later, so it all looks the same. Taking this Real Technique Dew brush that I got from Shein in a set, I'm going to just pat that concealer so that way I can have an even base. I always make sure I pat out the edges so that way it'll blend into the foundation and the concealer I'm going to put later on really well. I make sure I take that concealer down the nose and on the bridge of the nose. Just make sure you blend out the concealer until you don't see any lines anymore. I take some translucent powder on a taper brush and I'm going to set the lid. I don't like the lid to be too shiny. I really like a matte lid too. And this translucent powder is going to make it so much easier for our colors to blend out later on. You want to think about it like this. A powder is going to blend better on top of another powder versus you setting something on top of something wet later on, if that makes sense. I like to take the same shade I'm going to use for her nose contour when I do her face, and I just like to place that color from the bridge of her nose to the top of her eyebrow. This is just going to help the eyeshadow blend into the contour later on, so you don't have to have such like harsh white concealer right there. So there's no stopping between the eyeshadow and the contour shade. Taking the pink from the palette, I'm just going to take this on a fluffy brush. Y'all, I've had this brush for like 2-3 years. I have like 4 or 5 of these. I think it's a Morphe brush if I'm not mistaken, but I really don't remember where I got this brush from. I've had it for so long. As y'all can see, it's like chipping off. But I take the middle pink color in the palette, and I'm gonna use that as her crease color. And I just take it from the front part where we started that contour shade to the corner of her eye, going along where I would use as a line for her crease. Staying in the same shape really helps take the look to another level, and it helps everything move quickly because you don't have to worry about blending stuff in too much, and it's already in place for you later on. You're gonna see I'm gonna keep the same shape with each color, each brush I use, and it's gonna be so easy for me to do the lid later on. This color is actually not in the palette. I took an orange from my Juvia's Place palette, and I don't know, the orange was calling to me, and it really worked. It had like this sunset effect on the pink, and I think it really brought the look together. Now I'm going to take this small crease blending brush and the darker pink from that palette, and I'm going to go back and forth in her crease to add some depth, and you can really see the shape of the lid when you keep going back with the same color. You can see I'm making and forming a shape. Now this is a little hack, a little tip that I do. So when I feel like a color isn't blended out all the way at the top, I take the same brush I use to blend out that concealer on her lid, and I'm just gonna tap around the edges so that way it blends it out. If y'all can see, go back and rewind, start from me using that brush, and the ending, it looked completely different. So this is the light pink from the palette, and I'm going to use this to shade in on the lid. And as you can see, because I already formed that shape, it's really easy for me to put this pink on the eyelid in the shape that I want because I prepared for it. This whole time I've been putting eyeshadow on her lid. The key thing that I teach in my classes is to do everything with intention. So I started my eyeshadow with intention to do this pink eyeshadow because I knew it was coming later on. When I do my concealer placement and my foundation placement, I put it on there with the intention to keep everything in that one place and have everything flawless. So if you have the intention of what you're doing in your hair, you're going to execute your look to the best of your ability. So after I placed the pink on the lid, I just went back with that small eyeshadow brush that I used on that darker pink, and I just blended out the edges. I was really kind of iffy on whether I wanted to do a black wing liner or not, so I really just stopped at the corner, and I used my Inglot gel liner to do this. I had a really long liner brush to do it at first, and it just wasn't working, so I switched to a shorter one, and it worked way better. I really love using my Inglot because it just gets super matte and it doesn't transfer. When I got the liner to the shape that I wanted, I blended out the edges with some of that dark pink eyeshadow, and then I went back and did some black eyeshadow on top of the edge of where I did the liner, so that way it will blend into the eyeshadow, if that makes sense. So on the edge of the eyeliner, I blended in black, and then I blended the black out with this purple. Now you see how the corner look different of the eyeshadow? That is what I'm talking about. That's why I blended it out with the black and then went through and blended it out with that darker pink color. After I finish with all the eyeshadow, to move on to the face, I just go and clean off all of the fallout from the eyeshadow because I have quite a bit of fallout because I really don't care about fallout because I can just clean it up later. I start off with this Confidence in the Cream by It Cosmetics, and I'm just going to put this all over the main parts of her face, and then I'm going to rub it in with my hands, just making sure I get underneath her eyes to prevent creasing, and I make sure I get in the corners of her nose because that's the most frequent place I find that people are really dry is the corner of their nostrils. So make sure you put moisturizer in those places. Then I'm going to take my Too Faced Hangover Primer, and I love these two together, and I'm just going to do the same thing I did with the moisturizer, making sure I get under her eyes and in the creasing of her nose. To finish off my skin prep, I spray her with some Mario Badescu spray, and I just pat and rub that in the same way I did her moisturizer and her primer. So usually I conceal the top of the eyebrow with foundation, but I decided to go in with concealer. This is the Butterscotch, my bad, concealer, and I'm just going to go really slowly, again pressing in the skin, starting with the front part of the eyebrow, going to the arch, and then I'm going to take the arch and go to the tail. I like to take it in 2 steps most of the time. It's just easier for me to do it that way, and this is the shape that I wanted for her eyebrows. I keep working the shape. Y'all don't see, but I step back and look at her head on straight in front of her so I can make sure her eyebrows match, and I just keep going with the concealer until I get sisters or twins with the eyebrows. Y'all cousins are not okay. But that is a trick I do. Make sure you get different perspectives on the face and just step back so you can make sure everything is matching from the left side to the right side. With foundation, I like to work in sections, and I use the same foundation on her usually every time. I use NARS Macao, and I mix it with a little bit of Tahoe, just a little bit, because Macao is a little bit too dark for her. So I put in a little bit of Tahoe, and I use the same foundation every time. Every time y'all see her on my tutorials, on my TikTok, same foundation, same concealers every time, I promise y'all. So as y'all can see, I like to do these little tabs of foundation all over her face, and then I go in with a Real Technique dupe and I pat out the foundation, and then I'm going to move on to the other side of her face and I'm going to do the same thing. When I blend my foundation, I make sure I get underneath her chin and I make sure I get behind her ears. So that's what y'all keep seeing my head go back and forth. I always make sure the foundation is blended underneath the chin, almost going down the neck, so you don't see a line of demarcation between her actual skin and her face. After I finish the face, that's when I move on to the forehead. I always do that last for some reason. I'm just going to place the foundation and blend that out with the same brush I did the rest of her foundation with. After I do the foundation, I just go in with her concealer, and I take a Too Faced concealer, and I think this is the color Toffee if I'm not mistaken, and I just put it on her cheekbones, her forehead. I don't think I'll do it down her nose at this second, but I do use this to contour her nose later on. After I do the contour, I just place the concealer underneath her eyes. I like to do the concealer before I do the contour, so that way the concealer can sit on her face a little bit. And for this look particular, I was going for a really bright under eye. I usually don't go this bright under the eye, but I decided to this day. And I'm just going to let this sit on her face a little bit so it can build a little bit more coverage. I really love the way it looks when you sit and build coverage, and it doesn't crease as much when you let it sit and get a little thick. But I use this up the bridge of her nose as well. You want to take it in a straight line because that's the shape you want it to be at the end. Again, this is something else you're going to do with intention. And you're going to put that same color on her forehead as the brightener later on. After I place my contour and my concealer, I take this blush stick, and this is from Mocha Makes. I really love this mauve pink color, and it matches the eyeshadow perfectly. I just put this in between the contour and the highlight, and after I place that, I go through and blend out the forehead because it won't have that pink color in it, so I'll blend out the forehead first before I blend out the cheeks. I'm trying to be real careful when I do the contour this time because I didn't use tape over her edges, and y'all know I usually use tape over the edges because I like to get messy with my blending. For some reason, the messier the contour blending is, the better it is. So I like to use tape, but this time I didn't. I wanted to get the practice in doing without the tape on there, but I'm going to start doing it with the tape every time. Now, after I blend out the forehead contour, I'm just going to blend out the cheek contour and the blush at the same time. And then I'm going to tap that into the concealer and use it as a transition brush as well. I just go back and forth to make sure everything is blended. On the side of her eyebrow, sometimes I like to squeeze the brush so that way it gets skinny and I won't have to worry about it blending so far over her lace. After I blend out the contour, I just start by blending out my concealer on the forehead into the contour. I use the same brush because it makes it blend together better for me if I use the same brush I did with the contour, for at least for the forehead. Then I'm going to take that same brush and I'm just going to use it to blend out the edges of the concealer into the blush. I'm basically using it to blend three things at one time. As you can see, my brush placement is a little bit over the contour, it's a little bit over the blush, and it's on the edge of the concealer. So I'm literally blending out three different things at one time. This is when it comes to taking your time and knowing where you want your products to go. I know where I want my products to start and stop, so it's easy for me to blend multiple things at one time. Now I'm going to apply a brightening concealer, and if I'm not mistaken, I mixed my warm beige with shortbread, which gave me a really light color, and I'm just going to put this right underneath the corner of her eye because I'm not going to blend this too far. I really want this to stay inside of the corners. taking the same type of brush I use for her lid, but this is a clean brush. I'm just going to tap up and down her nose, keeping that same straight line so I can go ahead and contour later on. And like I said, I'm going to use the Toffee, and this is the same brush I use to do her eyebrows. I recycle brushes the whole time I do faces. We're not going to be messing up too many brushes on faces. We're not going to be doing that. It takes too long to clean brushes. Now, the closer you put the contour on the nose, the smaller the nose is going to be, as long as you blend it out correctly. So I make sure that I have my contour close together because I want her to have a small nose. And when I contour my nose, I just go up and down, slowly blending it out into the eyebrows so that way I can get the color that I want and I can make sure I get the shape of the nose I want. I don't blend too far in because you don't want the nose to disappear, and you don't want to blend too far out so that way the nose will look wide. So you really want to be conscious of the shape you do the nose because people are going to see that first. It's like literally in the middle of your face. When I get done with the nose, now that the concealer has sat a little bit, I'm just going to take the same brush that I use to blend out the eyelid. This actually is the same brush. And I'm just going to tap to blend out the concealer, doing the edges first and then doing the inside of the eye. I always do the edges first because it's easier to blend it out. And you don't want that color and too much of the product that's on the inside of the eye to get everywhere. You have to really, really be careful about where you blend your brushes. Not brushes. Products. You want to be really careful about where you blend your products. That's why you want to move slow. Y'all, my words mixing together today. I don't know. When I blend closer to the nose, I just make sure that I lighten up my hand. You really want a light hand so that way this blends out like butter. And I just slowly move up to the nose, blending in that contour. And I don't go too far up or too far down. After I blend out with a brush, I just like to secure my blending out with the powder puff. This is a clean powder puff with nothing on it. And then after I do that, I go through with my powder. I'm going to use Banana Bread by Huda, if I'm not mistaken. And I just make sure I don't use a lot of this powder. And I just tap lightly underneath both of the eyes, having her look up to the ceiling so that way I don't set any creases in her eye. Make sure she's looking up, like she does not look down in between me blending out the concealer and the powder, because a lot of people do that and it'll put a crease right underneath their eyes. You want to make sure you keep looking back and checking your clients, securing them, making sure they know they still need to be looking up. And with this powder, sometimes a little can look like a lot. So I make sure I press this powder into her skin. There is no baking at this point. I'm pressing all the powder in. I put this underneath her eyes. I use this to bake her nose. I also use this to set her chin and her forehead area. After I've set all her concealed areas and I've baked the line on the nose, I just make sure I take that same contour I used when I started the eyeshadow, and I just go up and down the nose, making sure I keep a straight line. I really set the line for me with her cream contour, so I know exactly where I want her contour to be when I put the powders. Just make sure you blend this powder up into her eyebrow because it's going to give you a natural gradient from the contour to the eyebrow if you blend it all the way up. Making sure you blend it to the eyeshadow as well, because you don't want it to look like the eyeshadow is really choppy and disconnected from the contour. Next, I'm going to take my translucent powder, and I keep saying translucent because I don't know if this is one size or if it's my Derma Blend. At one point in time, I was switching because I ran out of Derma Blend. I had to get one size and I didn't like it, so I'm not sure which powder this is, but I'm just going to take an excess of powder and I'm just going to set underneath her eyes. Then I'm going to bake, so I'm going to leave this powder on her eye, making sure I reverse contour underneath the nose so that way it gives that slimming look, babe. You want the nose to look slimming, so every step you got to do it with the intention to make that nose smaller. Snatch the nose up. I know y'all tired of seeing my phone, but I'll be having to record TikToks. Like, that's how y'all see me. I'm gonna take my contour shade, and if I'm not mistaken, the color I keep using for the contour is the KKAO palette, the face palette. And I'm just going to use this on her forehead. I'm also going to use this on her cheekbones just to add back in some dimension to her face. I like this palette because it's not too much like of a bronzy color. It's very neutral. And then I'm going to go in with the bronzer. And I think this is Pacific Sand from ColourPop. And I'm just going to use that as a bronzer in between her contour. And of course, like I said at the beginning, this is all about maximizing your product. So this is the actual pink we used, the first color when we did her eyeshadow, and I'm just going to use this as a blush. As y'all can see, this is very, very, very pigmented. So I get a little bit of the color, wipe it off on my hand, place it on her face, and I keep blending it out until it's blended out, and then I go back and add some color as I need it. As y'all can see, when I blend my blush, I blend it underneath her eyes, and I also blend it into the contour. You want to make sure the blush isn't just right there on your cheekbones. You want to make sure it's blended into everything. Now I'm going to take Cookie from my Anastasia, and I'm going to set underneath her contour, and I'm going to reverse contour and bake. I take this really light pink gel liner, and I'm just going to pop this into her waterline to add some pop. I liked the idea of putting white, but I wanted to stick with the theme of the pink, so that's what we did. For the under eyeshadow, I just used the same colors I did with the ombre on the lid. I started with that really dark pink, and then I worked my way up to the middle pink. I don't think I used that really light pink. I think I just used the two to do an ombre underneath her eyes. Y'all know how I do my lashes, so I always do a line of do a lash glue on my liner or right by the lash line, so that way the lashes can have a double stick on them, and at the same time I'm putting the glue on the false eyelash. I always do the bottom mascara before the top, so that way the top mascara won't transfer to the lid if I put it on the top first while they're looking up. So I make sure I do the bottom first with the mascara, and I go side to side instead of swiping, so that way it's a least chance that I get mascara on the face. Now we're going to move on to my favorite part of this whole look, which is the lips. So I'm going to start off with some clean lips. Make sure y'all start off with clean lips, y'all. Clean lips. And I'm just going to wipe off with a Neutrogena pad. And then I'm going to line with my Milani pencil in Saucy Toffee. This is one of my favorite pencil. I would use this as cork dupe. It is very, very beautiful, and it's creamy, and it just smooths on very well. I've been using it for about a year now. Definitely recommend it. I feel like I have literally shown y'all this lip routine like 1,000 times, and I probably have on my Instagram and my TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. I do it the same way literally every time. Y'all have probably seen me use the same colors 1,000 times. Y'all have just not known it. But I go through and fill in the corners, so that way it gives a better ombre when I do the lipstick later on. I just fill in a little bit of the liner onto the lips. I don't just line the lips and then move on. I line the lips, fill in the corner, and then I blend out the liner with a disposable lip brush, so that way it's easier for me to blend out the lipstick. In the midst of that, the lashes are done drying. I try not to let my lashes dry too much or they won't stick. So I try to be careful when I put the lashes on, because when y'all do the glue on your lid and the lash band, when you put the lashes on your eye, they're staying wherever you put them. So be careful. Then I just go back to doing the lips. I place the lipstick on the middle of the lips, and then I have them pat their lips together, so that way the lipstick on the bottom naturally transfers to the placement on the top, and I can see like if it naturally transfers to the right area or if I need to blend it out some more. Most of the time I do blend it out just a little more, but a lot of times people will place the lipstick perfectly on their lips without me doing it. Just make sure they don't swipe their lips together. Make sure they pat their lips, not swipe. And then I'm going to go through with my disposable lip brush again. Just blend out the edges just like you did for the liner. When it comes to gloss, 9 times out of 9, I'm using 2 glosses. I always use a clear gloss and I use a color gloss. I use a clear gloss so that way it's easier if people need to go back and fix their lips. So I'm going to go through, I think I used my Ariel K lip gloss for this, and I do the same thing. I place the lip gloss in the middle of the lips, and I have them pat their lips together, and then I go through and blend out the edges. Now it's time for the finishing touches, and this one I'll be looking at my work like, you did that, like it's coming together. So I just take that same tapered brush that I used to set the lid, and I'm just patting in and swiping off the powder I have on her face. I'm sort of like patting, swiping at the same time. If you can tell, I'm patting, swiping, patting, swiping. And then sometimes I go through, well, most of the time I go through and add a little bit more of the bronzer and the blush. So that way it just brings out a little bit more on her cheeks if you wiped a little bit of the product away. I'm going to go through and set her face with my Morphe Continuous Setting Spray. And I'm going to cover up her eyes so that way the setting spray doesn't get to her eyeshadow. Sometimes the setting spray can make the eyeshadow look a little patchy. So I just cover it up sometimes with my hands. I go through with my powder puff and press in that setting spray so that way the setting spray is just pressed into the powder and it has more of a dewy matte look instead of a straight matte look if you press in the spray. And I always do spray highlighter spray, so then I go through with a small brush and I'm just putting the highlighter on the tip of her nose, the bridge of her nose, and in between her eyebrows, sort of on her forehead, just to bring some type of like splat to the look. And I think I put some on her brow bone too if I can't remember. I did this actual tutorial like a month ago and I'm just now uploading it to YouTube. I finished this look off with some more setting spray and just patting it in with my triangle powder puff, and then I let her see her face. And the one thing I love about Cami, she gonna give you the reaction you need to know you set the look off. She gonna give you the reaction you need to know you did your motherfucking thing. Whenever you need an ego booster or whenever you feeling down about your look, Cami, she made me feel so much better because she gonna give me the reaction I need. See, look, the reaction matches the personality. Just know we be cracking up the whole time. And that was it, y'all. I hope y'all liked that tutorial. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow me on all my social medias at I am Shanti Slays.